Okay, welcome to another iPad painting tutorial. On today's tutorial I'm going to do a out of focus sunset scene, but in the foreground is going to be snow that's landed on grass, so maybe it's just the beginning of winter, that kind of setting. In the UK now it's getting really cold, winter is setting in, so it feels kind of appropriate to do that. So as usual I'm using the Procreate app on an iPad. I've got an A4 canvas. The brushes I'm going to be using are within the airbrushing section, predominantly the soft brush, but I might also use the medium brush as well. I like to keep things really simple in terms of the brushes. If you want to experiment with different texture brushes, then that's something you can do as well. In terms of the colours, I've got some pre-selected colours here. If you want to use these exact colours, there is a link in the description of this video for my Patreon page. If you follow the link, it does take you to a free download. You don't need to be a supporter of mine. The download is free. And also the colour codes are there as well. If you take a note of the colour codes, you can put them into this section where it says hexadecimal, type in the codes one at a time, press enter, the colour will appear up here, you drag it down into your palette and you could construct something very similar, or the same in fact. So all of that out of the way, we're going to start our painting. On our first layer, we can go to our colours, we're going to use this colour, and I'm just going to drag it from that corner into the canvas, let go, and it should flood and fill that entire layer. I always like to do that, it gets rid of the intimidating white background, gives you something that immediately when you add other colours, it creates an effect. So I'm going to create another layer. On this layer, I'm going to go to the third colour along actually, and we're going to go to our brushes. We're going to use the soft brush, go to the size of the brush and we'll put it at around 10% and we'll have the opacity at around 20%. And I'm going to choose my horizon line, which I'm going to do just a little bit under the halfway line. And I'm just gradually, I'm only pressing on lightly. You can press on a bit more and you get a little bit more, but I'm pressing on lightly. And I'm bringing it up and letting it fade out as we get a little bit higher. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit streaky. We are going to blur this anyway. And I might just have another section creeping in here and maybe another little bit up here. Strengthen it up just at the bottom. Okay, so we don't need to do any more than that on this layer. We'll create another layer, go back to our colours. I will select this colour this time. I'll go back to my brush. I'll go back to my brush, turn it down a little bit. We'll put it at around 7%. We'll keep it on the 20% opacity still. And on the inside of some of these pink colours, I'm going to be adding this paler colour. I want combinations of those two colours. Maybe by keeping it a little bit smaller, we're keeping some of the warmer colour, more of a pink colour, slightly the edges of this orange, but really it's the combination of the two. Now because we're starting it quite soft focus, we shouldn't need to blur it very much at all. But if you have found that you haven't quite created a soft effect, then when we blur it in a few minutes, then it's going to get rid of some of those streaks and those harder edges to your brush marks anyway, so it's not a problem. Okay, we'll create another layer, we'll go back to our colours, and I'm going to start putting in this yellow colour. So I'm going to keep the brushes the same as they were, so it's still on 7% and it's still on 20% there. I'm going to decide to put the sun completely in the middle. Tap and go over it a few times. And then I'm going to just have it spreading left and right a little bit. So I'm lightly encouraging it left and right. Maybe just a little bit further in places. I can just do a few taps. This is very much out of focus anyway. There's one extra colour that I feel that I need to create there actually that I've not done. So we'll go back to our disc and I'll show you how to do it. If you're wanting the pure white, all you need to do is go to somewhere close to the pure white and double tap and it automatically snaps to the purest white, and then all you need to do is tap it on the end. Likewise, if you're in a colour area like this and you wanted that pure colour, you go to somewhere in that area where you think it's going to be fully saturated, double tap and it will snap to it. Likewise black, likewise grey. So we may also stay on the same layer that we've just used the yellow, and we'll go to this white colour and we'll use the same brush, same settings, and we'll create a white centre for our sun. We want this to be really bright, have a really strong impact, so we'll just tap it a few times. We want to keep filling it and keep painting it until it goes right to the very edge. We don't want it to completely destroy the yellow, but at the same time we want it to go right to the edge of that shape. We can come back to that in a little while, but we're going to keep moving forward, so we'll create another layer, go back to our colours, go to this red. We're going to turn the size of the brush down a little bit this time. We'll move it to 5%, and we'll turn the opacity down to 15% as well. And I just want to bring some of this really nice rich red colour into the bottom section there a little bit. And we're just darkening this up, making it richer. We'll create another layer. I prefer to do all of these things on different layer, therefore if you do make a mistake, you're only making a mistake on one small section of your painting, and if you need to go back and you need to adjust it, so you could change the brightness, the saturation, the opacity, any of the elements of this particular layer you can adjust independently of the rest of the painting. I do work like that when I'm doing my full paintings, and I do that for the tutorials because it really helps. So on this new layer, we'll go back to our colours. We've used all of the top colours for now, and now we're going to move to these second row of colours. So we're going to go for the darkest blue first of all, and we're going to stay on the same settings we were just using. So we're going to use it at 5% brush size and 15% opacity. And I'm just going to follow the red shape that I created. And I'm just going to start adding this dark blue to immediately follow the red that we've just added. I'm just creating that edge first of all, so I'm doing it carefully. I don't want to do this too strongly. It is dramatically darker than everything we've already added, so I'm doing it gradually. If you do feel like you've not been able to get a nice effect, and I've done it deliberately kind of rough there, we can go onto our adjustments, go onto our Gaussian blur, affect the whole layer and just smooth it in a little bit, and it will soften the impact of what we've just done, and then we can carry on. And if you need to keep blurring it in a few times, nothing wrong with that at all. I'm going to take it really close to the sun there, in fact. So it's going to mix with the red. You can always go back onto the red layer, add a little bit more of it as well. It's the contrast of colours that's going to really make the sun extra bright by having the darker colour next to it. So we've probably got some kind of features in the background, maybe some hills, maybe some trees. We're not going to get into the specifics. We're not showing the detail. It's going to be out of focus. We want all of the focus to be in the foreground objects. We've not done yet, so this is just background. As you can see, I'm doing it gradually though. I've got it on a low opacity and I'm not pressing on fully either. I'm letting it build up. If you get impatient, you can always at this point turn the opacity up, and we'll try that. We'll double the opacity to 30%, and we can just start to darken up some of this colour. Again, I'm pressing lightly when I get towards the edge. If I don't press on lightly, you get a really hard edge on the edge. We'll keep darkening it up. You can see I'm just going backwards and forwards across the scene, gradually building up that dark tone. Once we get to about here, it's okay to just really get more of it in place. And we're going to have different colours in the bottom section anyway. Now, bear in mind, some of these layers may need a little bit of extra work to smudge them in. In fact, I can see the top edge of this. Now, I can either do it by soft focusing the whole layer with the Gaussian blur, or I could go to my smudge tool, make sure that I'm on the soft brush, have the brush size, maybe it's around 5%, turn the opacity down a little bit to around 30%, and I could just smudge in some of these edges just to make them slightly less sharp. And that achieves a very similar effect in just the same way. I'm pushing it downwards slightly. I don't want to push the blue up into the sun. That won't make sense. Okay, I'll create another layer. So we'll go to this next colour. We'll change the brush size slightly back up to 7%, and we'll put it at the 20% again. So I'm going to have this now blending from the darkest colour to this slightly lighter. Well, it's quite a lot lighter in fact. And again, I've still got it on a low opacity, so it allows you to just do things gradually. If I suddenly put this up at a high percentage, you're going to start seeing edges that won't really work, so we'll keep it at the 20% still. and blend it in. We'll go to our next colour, and I'm going to stay on this same layer for this colour because it's not really adding anything particularly new. It's just changing the tone of that blue ever so slightly so it gets just a little bit warmer as it comes further down. You're not really going to see most of this anyway, but we'll just bring it into that bottom section. In fact, we'll turn the opacity up a little bit on that to 30%. Otherwise we're barely noticing its impact. So we'll bring it into that bottom section. It's a subtlety, but it's the kind of thing that your eye can notice. Okay, we're going to start thinking about our foreground elements now. So this is where it starts to become much sharper, and this is the point of most of the picture really. So we'll create another layer, we'll go to our colours, and we've only really got 2 colours to choose from, but it's going to be how I use those colours, and then I will dip back into the earlier colours to add elements to this foreground feature. So I'm going to start by creating a silhouette, and I'm going to change my brush to my medium brush. I'm going to turn the size of the brush up to begin with to 5%, and I'm going to put the opacity at 100%. So I'm going to build in a foreground area here, and I'm going to use this to now have some grass and some snow on the ground. Just create a rough edge for this. You don't need to get too precious about this. It's going to be made more interesting by the snow and the grass emerging from it anyway. So once we have this main shape, I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to go to my blue colour here, but I'm going to go back to my soft brush. I'm going to turn the size of the brush down to 4%. I'm going to turn the opacity quite low, certainly to begin with, to around 15%. I'm then going to use this colour. In fact, I'm going to turn the size of the brush even lower. I want to be super precise to begin with. I'll turn it down to the lower part of 3%, and I'm just going to begin by creating a top area of detail where perhaps the light, the sky, not just the sun that's in the far distance, but there might be some blue sky that's almost on the, if you were to turn around looking at the scene, you can see this to begin with, but you turn around, there's going to be extra bits of illuminated sky that might have more of this type of blue in it. So you're going to have an ambient light effect, and this is going to be this kind of blue. In fact, I'm going to turn the opacity up a little bit. That is a little bit too weak. So I'll put it at 25%. And what I'm going to do is just create some blobs, just in circular motions, where perhaps the snow is settled in areas. I'm certainly going to create some of that blue along the very top. So yeah, I'm continuing this circular motion, starting to build it up. I don't expect this to be a quick process. This is where most of the time should be put into this painting. So build it up gradually. You can do it in circular motions, or you can do some tapping. Now lots of short dashes and taps is definitely the way that I like to build up texture. If you try and do it all in one big motions, often we'll find that it doesn't look very nice. Whereas I think lots of granular texture can really help. So I'm leaving some gaps in the snow. In fact, I can add some with the darker colours anyway, but I'm going to begin by just leaving some broken areas of texture. Try to keep it a little bit random. Now random is sometimes quite a difficult thing to achieve, but basically you just don't want to repeat yourself too much and end up with something that looks like a stamp or a pattern. We're going to turn the opacity up a little bit. In fact, we'll put it at 30%. Let's get this sped up a little bit. I think it's a good thing to be slightly hesitant and build it up gradually initially, but once you're feeling a little bit more confident, then maybe go for it. And what I tend to try and do is, once I get to a certain stage, is try to imagine what you've got in front of you already, even at this early stage, as being 3D. So if you've got a shape here, start to imagine how the light might impact it. So if it's an area that sticks out here, it's going to be impacted by the sun. But it also might have a shadow of its own. So you could go back to your other colours, this middle blue for example, and you could go to this area underneath and start to add some shadow areas. So you're mixing up the types of blue in some of these areas too. You also have a really dark blue to play with as well. There's no reason why that can't be brought into the scene in places. We're going to have a lot of the light blue that I initially used, but you've got different blues within the scene that you can use. I've not changed the brush size, it's still at 3%, and I've not changed it since I put it to 30%. I just moved it then, but it is at 30%. Go back to our lighter colour. And we're just creating broken texture really, so now that when we start adding grass to our scene, it's got a setting, it's got something to actually play against. But before I add the grass, I'm just going to show you a hint of the kind of effect that we're going to be going for. So we'll go to these colours here, these two. We've got the orange and we've got this colour, which is more like a pink. Start with the pink colour, turn the size of the brush down to 2%, the bottom end of 2%. We will do it on a separate layer. We'll keep it at the 30% opacity, and we can just start to, along this very top edge, just add a hint that bits of the snow are actually being affected by the background, which is the sun, the orange, the pink, the yellow. And it's going to be this subtle use of these colours that is really going to bring this to life. So I've used some of the pink, I used some of the orange, just the occasional fleck of the orange. It's going to be little details like that that really start to bring it to life. We'll create another layer for the grass. We'll go to our black. I'm going to keep the settings the same so that we're on the lower end of 2% and 30% opacity. And I'm just going to start adding some blades of grass that perhaps are starting to poke out of the snow. Or perhaps they were there already and they've been totally covered by the snow. Now you can suggest some sort of textures on the end of the grass. We don't really need to get massively bogged down in the detail of it. So I'm pressing on lightly for some of the blades. I don't want to be massively strong in tone. And then other ones I can perhaps press on more. I can go over more as well. Now it could be tempting to put it at 100% opacity, but it's just going to be a little bit too strong. I think if you build it up gradually from the 30%, I feel like it softens it into the environment a little bit better. And you can always just press lightly and it kind of disappears into the environment that you've placed it as well. So we'll do another blade right next to it. We'll have it going straight off the top. We'll build up the strength of that at the bottom though. You can always zoom in, refine some of these lines. I'm looking at creating the overall effect like I explained earlier. This isn't going to be about super close-up realism for me. All of my tutorials are about the overall effect, and then if you have the luxury of time or interest and you want to keep going over it to build up the realism, then I do encourage that. So we'll have some blades of grass that maybe are growing from the other side of our mound, therefore they're going to be a little bit paler, which is why we can just press on lightly for them. Again, we're trying to achieve this random look, not always easy to do, but we're going to try and stick to avoiding patterns, avoiding where everything looks the same. We're going to have things just cross over randomly. Create some more in this area. So quite a few of these are going to be folded over by the weight of snow. But you're still going to get some that do manage to stay upright. This kind of detail that I wouldn't really encourage you to try and copy the exact same shape of the grass as me. Try your own. I'm going to do quite a lot of them, so to copy each and every one exactly the same is going to be a little bit more tedious for you. You can do your own shapes. Just getting the overall effect for you. The specifics can be your own choosing. I'm going to turn the opacity up a little bit to 40%, and we're just going to do some blades in the foreground. So we'll do a few short pieces of things that just stick up maybe from the snow. Some things that, like I say, are just over the top. Start to fill up this area. I'm going to leave this area a bit empty. I'll do something a little bit different a little later on, but I'm not going to have too much going up into the centre of that sun area. Okay, I'm going to switch colours. I'm going to go back to this blue colour, and I'm going to use this now to just pick out the fact that some of the blades of grass you're not going to see really in the black area, but you will notice the snow that clings to them. So we can start to bring our attention to certain areas of grass just by the fact that it's a blue stripe in a black area. So it's inverting what we've been doing so far. Having said that, it can also bring together the grass when it goes over the blue and when it goes over the black. So by adding the blue to certain areas of our grass, we can make it really jump forward and be noticeable. So we can concentrate it on one side if we want, but if it's been a really frosty environment, then it might cling to both sides of our blade of grass. So I can do it in some slightly tapping gestures, having it clinging to the grass, or on one side and then the other, And just repeat this across the scene. So I'm not doing a solid line, I'm trying to keep it again textured and broken. So maybe you haven't added some of the black grass yet, but you can still go ahead with the blue, and then you can go back to the black colour and just start to work back into it wherever you've added the blue as well. So you can move backwards and forwards. You don't always need to have added the black first. You can use the blue first, then go back and use the black to justify the use of the blue. I'm just going to use this black to start to really exaggerate some of the gaps in the snow a little bit as well. So I might feel there's an area here. I just want to sharpen up some of the areas where there is a gap. Okay, we're on this layer that has the grass, but I'm going to create a new layer and we're going to go back to our colours. We're going to use these two colours again. I'm going to keep it at the, I'll show you clearly, I'll keep it at the 2% opacity. I'm going to keep it at the 40% opacity, but I'm going to alternate between these two colours now, just to bring out some of the highlights in some areas. So for example, any of the blades of grass that really go close to the sun, I can start to just go over them, especially if it's a black that we've used. I'll go over it just to soften in the impact when it gets close to the sun like that. So it's going to pick up the sun on one edge of the blade, maybe both. Again, we're going to add some more of this texture, this bright colour into the bottom area of the snow, and we'll alternate between those two colours. So we've got this more orange, or rather pink colour, and we'll use this too. Now I'm going to use this more sparingly than the blue, but the impact of this is quite strong. So we definitely want it, but we don't want it on every single piece. So we're just bringing a hint of it in here and there, but it's quite powerful, the impact. We are concentrating its impact immediately in this area because that's, as you can see, where the sun is. Now as you get further over here, you might just have the slight hint of it, but you're not going to have as much. So maybe just the pink colour impacting slightly over here, but not as much as over here. And then just for this orange colour, we'll keep this for this area. So I'm using this orange colour just to extend some pieces of grass up into that area perhaps. We can have it breaking up. We could even go back to our other colours. Well, this colour actually, this is almost like a mauve colour. We'll just use that to extend the grass up into that section just at the bottom, but then it quickly starts to disintegrate in there. And we could even use the black a little bit more, just at the bottom edges there. But then as it goes up in here, it fragments, it disappears. So again, I've used the orange to extend some of the grass up into that scene. We could even, let's play around with this a little bit, we could have one blade of grass that goes above it perhaps, and goes right through, so we can experiment with the fact that it breaks up. Sorry, I tried to select the black there, it failed. We'll try again. We can have a blade of grass that goes all the way through. But you can see it almost like it disintegrates as it goes through that sun area. I'll just try and neaten it up a little bit because it is going to be the area that people will focus on now because I've made a point of putting it through the sun. So we can switch with our different colours. We'll try this pink colour. Maybe soften the top edge of that a little bit. It's going to be very much impacted by the sun. In fact, that's too much. Let's dial it back. So we do want some of that pink on the very edge of it perhaps, but we'll preserve the centre being dark. But it gets lighter as it goes over the sun, and then you can see it's almost like it's fragmented there. And maybe we'll extend that blade of grass across it too. Why not? So I'm using the orange and the black. Orange when it gets over the sun area, and then as soon as it goes out of that area I can use some black, but I'm going to use the orange to, just like I did with the blue either side of the black, I'm going to use the orange and maybe the pink just to illuminate the outer edges of our grass as well. And we can continue that downwards like that. Use this orange, do a little bit more of that on some of the blades of grass that are really creeping into this area, but then like I say, it's just reserved for this area. As soon as we get into this area and this area, the orange probably shouldn't be used. You can use some of the pink over here, some of the pink over here, but the orange is really reserved for this center area. So I'm going to just exaggerate it slightly for this bit. I'm going to go back to my blue colour, just start adding some of the snow that clings to the grass again. So I'm just creating some random bits of extra detail and noise into our scene. In fact, I'm looking at this area compared to this area. I feel like we've got a nice area of the pink colour in that bit, but I feel like we need a little bit more over here, just a hint of it. You can go too far with this colour, so just use it sparingly. Go back to my blue colour again. I really want to make sure there's enough snow clinging to the edges of these bigger pieces. I'm going to increase the size of the brush, just start building in some more foreground snow details perhaps. I'm going to put the opacity of this blue snow colour up really quite high to 60% and just turn the size of the brush down to the top end of 2%. And I'm just going to use it just to, in areas if I feel I need a little hint more of that blue, just increase it. In fact, it might be better to go back to our snow layer here and do that there. Therefore, if I do it and there's a blade of grass over the top, it's not going to damage or impact too severely on that. I'm going to soften the opacity as well, so I want to create some subtle effects. I'll put it at 10%, and I want to have some hints of that coming in areas too, just to create variety. I'm just going to have a look at my earlier layer. So it's this layer with the sun. I'm just going to experiment, look at the properties, go to adjustments, try this bloom setting, will affect the whole layer, and we'll impact it across. And you can see the impact that has. It really can make it look more dramatic. Now you can see as it was just with the painted effects. Now if you prefer to have it all as done manually, that you can leave it as that. But if you want to just sharpen it up, increase the drama of the piece, then you can slide it across too. So I don't like it when it's all the way across. You may like it. I think it does work, but I also like it when it's a more subtle effect. So I think I will adjust it, but I'm only going to take it to maybe around the 10%. Again, it didn't really need that, arguably, but perhaps it just nudges it into being that little bit more realistic, and that's fine. Now, I didn't really need to go back into those other layers and use this soft focus, or use the Gaussian blur rather, but if you do feel that some of your layers are a little bit too textured still, you can go back to your Gaussian blur, affect the whole layer, and just smooth it in a little bit if it feels like it's necessary. Let's have a look. We'll just move it on a little bit again to around the 10%, so we'll try it without. Try it with, and you can just see, experiment a little bit. You might prefer it to be really blurred out like that. You might prefer it a little less. I'm going to blur it out just a little bit at around the 10%. Okay, I'm going to leave this tutorial here. Make sure to press the bell notification button when you subscribe. Check my playlists. Hit the like button, it really helps the video and the channel, and I'll catch you back here soon. See you later.